Have you ever been scrolling through your feed and just wondered if you're living on a completely different internet than half the people you know? It really feels like we're all just shouting into our own separate voids. Well, today we're going to try and unravel that mystery of why the web feels so divided. And I'll tell you right now, the answer's probably not what you think. Okay, so take a look at this. This wild image comes from a German study. Back in 2017, this fake news story about a supposed travel warning for Sweden, it just spread like wildfire online. Now, every single red dot you see here, that's an account that shared the fake story, and every blue dot, that's an account sharing the correction. It's pretty stark, isn't it? They're two almost completely separate worlds. And that right there, that's the central puzzle we're trying to solve. I mean, they're all discussing the exact same event, but look, there's almost zero crossover. No communication between the two groups. It's like they're separated by some kind of invisible wall. So the big question is, what is that wall made of? Now, the most common answer you're going to hear, the one everyone points to, is the filter bubble. It's become the go-to explanation for why our online lives feel so polarized. The idea, which was coined by Eli Parzer, is actually pretty simple. Algorithms figure out what we like, and then they build us this perfectly personalized little online world, filtering out anything that might challenge our views. You know, it's a really neat explanation. It makes it seem like the red group was just stuck in a bubble where the blue correction could never, ever reach them. But is that what actually happened? So the theory goes like this. That tight little red knot just never even encountered the correction. They were way too insulated by their algorithmic bubble. But here's the thing. The researchers behind the study, they decided to actually go and check. And this right here is where the whole story just gets fascinating. The researchers didn't just guess. They went in and analyzed the timelines of every single person who spread that fake news. And what they found? It completely blows up the filter bubble theory. The vast, vast majority of fake news spreaders, they did have the correction pop up in their feeds. For that Sweden story, a staggering 89.2% of the people in that red knot saw the correction. Think about that. The information absolutely got through. The bubble, it turns out, was full of holes. So it wasn't a lack of information that was the problem here at all. And get this, here's the craziest part. When the researchers looked at the blue cloud, the people who were spreading the correction, they found something truly remarkable. 57% of them had never even seen the original fake news story to begin with. So if anyone was living in a bubble, it was actually the people trying to correct the story. So if the technology isn't building this impenetrable wall between us, then the reason for this deep, deep divide, it has to be somewhere else. The problem isn't in our feeds, it's in our heads. And this brings us to the real conflict, the one that's really at the heart of our divided web. See, it's not really about facts versus fiction. It's about something way more fundamental. It's about truth versus our sense of who we are. There's this psychological thing called cognitive dissonance. It's that really uncomfortable feeling you get when reality clashes with what you believe to be true. And to avoid that feeling, our brains are literally wired to seek out information that confirms what we already think. It's called a confirmation bias. The people in that red knot didn't lack information. They spread the fake story because it felt true. It just fit their worldview. And this just brilliantly illustrates those two different worldviews. The word cloud for the red, fake news group, is laser focused on these supercharged terms like Islam, Merkel, and migrant. Meanwhile, the blue group, they're talking in much more general terms about news, breaking news, and different media outlets. You see, they're not just using different words, they're living in completely different narrative universes. The journalist David Roberts actually gave this a name, tribal epistemology. It's a state where the idea of what's true and what's good for our side start to blur together and become the same thing. The main purpose of information stops being about accuracy, and it starts being about signaling your allegiance to your group. This study by Dan Kahan really shows just how powerful this effect is. So he gave people a math problem. When it was framed as a totally neutral question about skin cream, people's math skills were a pretty good predictor of whether they'd get it right. Makes sense. But then he presented the exact same numbers, but framed the problem as a question about gun control. And something fascinating happened. Suddenly, people's political views became more important than their math skills. In fact, the better they were at math, the more they used those skills to justify what they already believed. So,
Here's the crucial point. We don't really use our intelligence to find some kind of objective truth. We use it to defend our group identity. It's a behavior that's called identity protective cognition, and it proves that our brains have evolved for one thing above all else: belonging, not for being right.
And look, this isn't just a metaphor for how we think. This tribal instinct is physically wired into our brains, especially during a really critical time in our development, our teenage years.
Starting around age 10, our brains go through this massive shift. The receptors for happy hormones, like dopamine and oxytocin, just multiply. And that makes us incredibly sensitive to social rewards. Things like attention, approval, admiration from our peers. So what are social media platforms? Well, they're perfectly designed engines for delivering exactly those social rewards through likes and shares and comments, hacking directly into this deep-seated biological need to belong.
And the very nature of these interactions has fundamentally changed. In the past, our social lives were mostly in person, they were private, and they were temporary. Today, for young people, it's public, it's permanent, and it runs 24/7. Every single social interaction is broadcast for the world to see and judge, creating this high-stakes, relentless performance of identity.
So, what happens when you combine this ancient tribal brain wiring with this incredibly powerful modern technology? Well, you put an entire generation at risk.
And the research is showing us the toll this takes. This constant, high-stakes social performance is directly linked to a rise in mental health problems. The very brain wiring that makes young people crave connection is being exploited by these platforms, and it's often leaving them feeling more anxious, more depressed, and more isolated than ever before.
As Mitch Prinstein from the American Psychological Association puts it, this is a totally unprecedented experiment. We have outsourced our social lives to algorithms that are designed for one thing: engagement and profit, not for human well-being.
All right, so let's bring this all together. Let's retrace our steps from that initial mystery of the red and the blue dots all the way to here. The real story of our divided web. It's not a simple technology problem, like a filter bubble. It's a human one. There's a high demand for stories that confirm our tribe's worldview. And that demand exists because our brains are fundamentally wired to protect our identity, not to find the truth. And modern social media platforms have just become incredibly effective at exploiting this deep human wiring. And all of this leaves us with a really profound and honestly pretty unsettling question. We are watching an entire generation's social and psychological development be shaped by these powerful forces. So, what does it mean for our future when society itself is being built on a foundation of these digital tribes?